There are moments in the long story of Philippine basketball when the entire weight of what this program has built, and what it still hopes to become, rests on a single body. Usually, that body is 7 feet and 3 inches tall, weighs 232 pounds, and belongs to a 24-year-old from Las Piñas named Kai Sotto. The Philippines has now lost 3 consecutive games to New Zealand, and every one of those losses has come without him. That is not coincidence. That is arithmetic. That is the cold, precise ledger of international basketball, which does not care about your heart, your crowd, your legacy, or your intentions. It cares about bodies in the paint, wingspan against wingspan, and the quiet, ruthless fact of who controls the boards. On February 26th, at the Mall of Asia Arena in Pasay City, Gilas Pilipinas fell to New Zealand, 69-66. 3 points. A desperate heave from half-court that clanked off the iron as the buzzer cried out into a stunned arena. 3 points is the margin between a team that punched its second-round ticket early and one that limped home to regroup before July. 3 points is the distance between a conversation about Gilas' upward trajectory and the uncomfortable one now underway in every Philippine basketball corner of the internet. The one that keeps circling back to an empty locker room slot and an ACL scar that hasn't fully released its grip. This loss did not happen in a vacuum. It was the third chapter of a story that began the moment Sotto landed awkwardly in a January 2025 B-League contest against Seahorses Mikawa. He has been sidelined since that night, and what followed was a year-long marathon of rehabilitation. The kind that doesn't just test a player's knee but his entire sense of identity, his patience, his faith in his own body. The journey brought him to a point where he was publicly admitting to feeling like he'd hit rock bottom, before back-to-back double-doubles in the B-League reminded the world, and perhaps himself, what he is capable of. The Philippines basketball faithful have watched this script play out before. 15 years ago, another generation of Filipino fans had to reckon with what their national team could do without its most dominant force in the paint. They know what it costs. They know the structural weight a 7'3" center carries, not just in his hands or his feet, but in every opposing coach's game plan, in every rim protection calculation, in every opening he creates simply by standing in the vicinity of the lane. Remove him, and the geometry of your entire offense and defense rearranges itself into something smaller. The Philippines' overall record against New Zealand heading into this window was 1-6, and that single solitary win, the breakthrough that broke a lengthy drought, was achieved in November 2024 with Sotto at the center of everything, posting a near triple-double of 19 points, 10 rebounds, and 7 assists. That game, played before more than 11,000 electric fans at the Mall of Asia Arena, was the one that made people believe this rivalry had genuinely shifted. That Gilas had found the formula. That the ceiling had been raised. And then came Mikawa. And then came the silence. Despite recently returning to club action for Kashigaya, Sotto's camp confirmed definitively that he would not be joining the national team for this second window. The optimistic early reports, the ones that fed Filipino fans a week of cautious hope, dissolved into the familiar reality of an athlete who is managing not just a recovered knee but the accumulated weight of prolonged absence. There is a particular kind of frustration in watching a player who is clearly capable, who is posting double-doubles in the Japanese league, remain unavailable to his country. The camp's decision is defensible. It may even be wise. But wisdom does not soften the blow of watching New Zealand walk out of MOA with 2 more points in the standings. Let us talk about what happened on that floor. Dwight Ramos led Gilas with 16 points and 8 rebounds. CJ Perez contributed 15 points, 3 rebounds, and 3 assists. Juan Gomez de Liano gave the team 10 useful points off the bench. AJ Edu scored only 5, but his 11 rebounds, 4 assists, and 3 blocks told a story beyond the scoring column. These are not the numbers of a team that rolled over. They are the numbers of a team that competed, that clawed, that refused. But competing is not always enough, and clawing is not always sufficient. Max Darling led New Zealand with 11 points. Sam Menenga delivered a double-double of 10 points and 14 rebounds. That 14-rebound night from Menenga is the sentence that matters most in the box score. It is the number that explains everything. New Zealand won the glass war, extended possessions, and converted extra opportunities into the cushion that ultimately held. Without Sotto, Gilas has lost the rebounding battle in each of their last 3 encounters, sorely missing a man who ranked second in rebounding in the Asia Cup qualifiers with an average of 12.5 boards per game. That figure is not decorative. 12.5 rebounds per game is a structural fact. It means that in every game he plays, Sotto is effectively cancelling out one of the opponent's key offensive weapons before it even fires. New Zealand head coach Judd Flavell was gracious enough, and honest enough, to acknowledge exactly this after the game. He called out the Philippines' rebounding unit as one of the most physically challenging frontcourts they face in Asian competition, naming Sotto specifically as someone who gives Gilas an entirely different dynamic. Mobile, over 7 feet, and a handful on both ends. When the opposing coach is telling your press corps what you already know about your own missing player, the absence becomes official. Justin Brownlee, the naturalized player who functions as Gilas' primary offensive engine, was held to just 4 points on what turned out to be a dismal shooting night. This is worth dwelling on, because Brownlee's limitations when Sotto is absent reveal something important about how Tim Cohn's system actually works. Brownlee is a high-usage, high-pressure scorer, the kind of player who thrives when defenders are forced to make impossible choices between collapsing into the paint and guarding the perimeter. Sotto's threat at the rim creates those choices. Without that threat, New Zealand could load up, sag into the paint, and invite Brownlee to beat them from the outside. On this night, he could not. Quinton Milora-Brown, the 6'10" naturalized center, came in having grown noticeably more comfortable within Cohn's system since the first window. He acknowledged before tip-off that New Zealand would press, attack the offensive boards, and work to disrupt Gilas' rhythm, and he was correct on every count. "I think they are really keyed up," he said of his team in preparation. "Just the size I bring is different. That's the one thing you just can't train." Milora-Brown is correct. Size cannot be coached into existence. And yet size, like everything else in the sport, exists on a spectrum, and Sotto sits at a point on that spectrum that Milora-Brown, talented as he is, simply does not occupy. The Filipinos fought back from a 10-point fourth-quarter deficit. They cut it to 2, 64-66, off a Ramos three-pointer with under a minute to play. The crowd rose. The noise reached the kind of frequency that makes the walls of an arena vibrate with something that feels almost like prayer. In the history of Philippine basketball, comebacks like this have been completed. They are the currency of MOA arena dramatics, the thing this program lives on, the reason casual observers become lifelong converts to the Gilas cause. But Yanni Wetzel cleaned up underneath to push the lead to 4, Ruben Tay Rengi split from the line to make it 3, and when Ramos launched his half-court heave as time expired, the prayer went unanswered. 3 points. Now let us address the elephant in the room. A large, Cebuano elephant who scored precisely 1 point and grabbed 1.5 rebounds in this second window of play. The post-game noise grew louder around Junmar Fajardo. Some observers, noting his modest output, 1 point, 1.5 rebounds, with no field goals made in 6.5 minutes of action across the 2 second window games, suggested that the 9-time PBA MVP has reached the limit of what he can contribute at the international level. The phrase, Pang PBA Lang, began circulating, a Filipino expression suggesting a player is suited only for the domestic league, not the world stage. It is a critique that deserves to be examined carefully rather than dismissed reflexively. Fajardo turns 37 this November. He is a 12-time PBA champion, a 5-time finals MVP, a 9-time most valuable player, a resume that, in the context of Philippine basketball, has no peer. He arrived at the second window fresh off leading San Miguel Beer to a record 31st PBA championship, earning his 13th BPC award and his 5th finals MVP. Feats that exist in a category entirely of their own making in the history of a local game. The man is not diminished. He is, by almost every domestic measure, still operating at or near the summit of his professional powers. But international basketball is a different mountain. It is steeper, faster, and colder. New Zealand and Australia run systems designed specifically to expose the vulnerabilities of traditional post centers, the persistent hedge, the drop coverage, the switch-heavy schemes that deny post touches before they develop and dare big men to beat them with movement, pace, and range. These are not the tactics of PBA opponents calibrated for the Philippine domestic game. These are FIBA-level problems. At 36, Fajardo averaged only 1 point and 1.5 rebounds in limited minutes, but those 2 games were against teams that specifically exploit his physical limitations. They do not render him irrelevant. They reveal the importance of layering him correctly within a broader rotation. The critical strategic question Cohn must answer before July, when Gilas returns to face New Zealand and then Australia on the road, is not whether Fajardo is still useful. He is. His screen setting, his physicality, his experience in navigating traffic in the paint, his defensive positioning, These are real contributions that don't always appear in the box score. The question is how to integrate him into a system that functions at international pace, and how to pair him with bigs who complement rather than duplicate his skill set. With both teams currently sitting at 2-2 in Group A, and the away leg against New Zealand on July 3rd now carrying significant weight, that question is urgent. The answer, at full capacity, is peak Kai Sotto, a player who, in his return to club action, has been posting lines like 14 points, 10 rebounds, and 6 assists, and following it with 20 points and 14 rebounds in back-to-back games that showed genuine pre-injury form. The camp will not rush him. They have been deliberate and disciplined throughout this recovery, and the decision to sit out the February window was made with the long view in mind. As of mid-April, Sotto was averaging 12.2 points, 9.5 rebounds, 2.9 assists, and 1.1 blocks across his 20 post-injury games, numbers that would represent the most complete front-court production Gilas has seen from a Filipino-born player in recent FIBA history. The target remains the third window. July in New Zealand, and then Australia. Road games. Hostile crowds. No MOA electricity to carry the weight when the legs tire in the fourth quarter. The top 3 teams from each group advance to the second round, where Group A teams merge with Group C's Iran, Jordan, Syria, and Iraq, a path that will demand every available weapon. The Philippines has already confirmed second-round qualification, but the manner in which they navigate the remainder of this first round will shape their seeding, their confidence, and their tactical identity heading into that more demanding bracket. There is a generation of Filipino basketball watching all of this unfold who have never known an international frontcourt quite like the one that has been assembling itself around Sotto. The prospect of Sotto, Edu, Fajardo, and Milora Brown sharing the floor, a depth of size and skill that Flavell himself described as a genuine handful collectively, represents a version of Gilas that has not yet been field-tested at full strength. That is the version that will either validate or redefine what the Philippines can be in Asian basketball. Inquirer.net. Consider what it meant, historically, when the Philippines beat New Zealand for the first time ever in a major FIBA competition in November 2024. Not just a result, a milestone. A recalibration of what was thought possible for this program against Oceanian opponents who have historically treated Filipino teams as accessible wins. The Philippines went 1-6 all-time against New Zealand before that breakthrough game. 1 win in 7 tries, spanning years of heartbreak and near misses, erased in a single October night by a 23-year-old who was still becoming himself. That Sotto was the author of that breakthrough tells you everything about his significance. Not June Mar Fajardo, beloved and decorated as he is. Not Justin Brownlee, with all of his scoring gifts. The kid from Las Piñas, with the long arms and the basketball IQ that belies his years, orchestrating a near triple-double against an opponent that had made defeating the Philippines something close to routine. He changed the equation that night. And his absence has, quite precisely and quite cruelly, changed it back. Now look 5 years out from this moment and tell me what you see. You see a Philippine national team that is, despite the heartache of this second window, structurally healthier than it has been in a generation. Gilas qualified for the second round of the FIBA World Cup 2027 Asian Qualifiers even while absorbing back-to-back losses, a testament to the groundwork laid in that first window sweep of Guam. They are in the conversation. They are not merely hoping for favorable draws, they are competing to beat ranked opponents at home, and they came within a missed three-pointer of doing precisely that against the 25th ranked team in the world without their best player. The deeper question is what this team's ceiling is when healthy. And that question is inseparable from a more fundamental one about Kai Sotto, who he will be when his body is fully his own again. At 24, with ACL recovery behind him and a new contract situation forcing greater intentionality about where he plays and in what system, he stands at a genuinely consequential juncture. His current B-League club, the Kashigaya Alphas, is facing the prospect of relegation, which may force Sotto to seek a new team for the 2026-27 season, one that offers a higher level of competition to sharpen him further. The right environment, at the right stage of his recovery, could be the accelerant that transforms a promising international center into something the Asian game has genuinely not seen from a Filipino player before. Fajardo, for his part, has averaged 6.4 points and 4.3 rebounds across more than 50 FIBA appearances since 2013. Those numbers read quietly in isolation, but what they represent is over a decade of steady, professional service to a national program, including a breakout game in the 2014 World Cup against Senegal that helped end a 40-year victory drought for Philippine basketball in that competition. He will not play internationally at this pace forever. His service is finite, and probably closer to its final chapters than its early ones. The question now is whether the transition has been managed well enough that when Fajardo ultimately steps back from the stage, Sotto is ready to step forward into the full weight of it, not merely as a complementary piece, but as the anchor the Philippines needs him to be. That transition is already in progress. February 26th in Manila was one of its harder nights. The MOA Arena crowd that watched Dwight Ramos' last shot arc wide in the dying seconds went quiet the way only basketball crowds can, with that specific silence that isn't quite defeat and isn't quite acceptance, but something in between. The understanding that the result will stand. That the points in the standings column won't move. That the season continues, and the work continues, and July is coming regardless. Philippine fans have developed a particular resilience through years of close losses, agonizing margins, and the specific pain of watching talented teams fall just short of what they could have been. They know how to sit with that feeling. But they also know, because they have now seen it, what this program looks like with its full arsenal deployed. They saw it in November 2024. They saw a 7'3" kid become something more than a physical presence, become a game organizer, a defensive anchor, a player whose mere availability scrambles the opposition's preparation. That image does not disappear because of one long recovery and 3 hard losses. New Zealand has a problem. They know it. Their coach essentially said so at the podium. They need Kai Sotto to be absent to feel comfortable against the Philippines. And Kai Sotto, whatever the timeline, will not be absent forever. When he returns, fully, durably, sustainably, this conversation about what Gilas can achieve on the world stage will need to be restarted from a different premise entirely. That moment hasn't arrived yet. But it is coming. And the 3-point margin that separated those 69 from those 66, on a February night at the edge of Manila Bay, is merely the latest reminder of exactly what is waiting on the other side.